From what I can recall right now, I don't know of any opinion where the scholar has said that a person will be rewarded, or punished for that matter, in the absence of a niyyah. A niyyah has to be there. If there is ghafla, as you can see from this statement here, the person is not rewarded and the person is not eligible for punishment. This is because in ghafla, the person is excused. Now the ghafla is of different types, either because of khata or nisyan or jahal, etc. Or ghafla meaning the person, same sort of thing really, khata, nisyan or jahal or duress. The person has that excuse. But when he has that excuse for not doing the action or doing something wrong, we will say that the person will then be rewarded or eligible for reward and punishment once the niyyah is in place. And perhaps you're reading this from إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, the explanation of the hadith. But there is something which is known as al-istishab. Al-istishab an-niyyah. Istishab an-niyyah is actually a thing where the scholars have differed. Some of them said istishab an-niyyah is not sufficient, and some of them have said istishab an-niyyah, wal-adhhar, or what is apparent, is that istishab an-niyyah is sufficient and the person will be rewarded. Istishab is when the asl has been established, and once the asl has been established, you don't need daleel to say that that asl needs to reoccur. This is istishab, yeah? Remember we've done this before. So istishab an-niyyah is the same thing. When the niyyah has initially been established, does the person need to make tajdeed of niyyah every single time? If we are saying yes, then the person will not be rewarded for the ghafla. But if we are, or for the negligence, if we are saying that the istishab an-niyyah is actually a thing and it is rewardable, then there is no ghafla in that. Then there is no negligence in that. Let me give you an example of this all, yeah? A person, he gets a job for the purpose of providing for his family, acting upon the ayah, الرجال قوامون على النساء. So this person goes to work because he wants to be the breadwinner, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told him to be the breadwinner, right? So when he gets the job, that's his intention. That's the niyyah which has been established. Now for the period that he is working, the istishab continues for that person. So every time he goes to work, inshallah, he'll be rewarded. Or do we say, no, he needs to renew his niyyah every single day? We will say, no, as long as he's got the niyyah from the beginning and he says to himself, right, as long as I've got this job, I'm out there working, khalas, this is me acting upon the ayah, this is istishab an-niyyah. So there could be an element of ghafla and negligence in that. So now, a week into the job, he's thinking, oh, I don't want to get up so early and I really can't, I really don't want to go in, etc. But he forces himself to do so. Does he need to renew his niyyah? We'll say no, he'll be rewarded because the intention from the outset was to act upon the ayah. So this is istishab an-niyyah. But istishab an-niyyah doesn't always work for all acts of worship. Sometimes there has to be a tajdeed of the niyyah. And this is why there is a difference of opinion between the ulama. And what we will say in the answer in that, so some of them have said, well, every single action is separate, so the person will not be rewarded for the ghafla when he doesn't have the intention for doing it the next day. An example of that is fasting. Some of the Malikiya have said if a person has niyyah from the beginning of the month, then this is sufficient. Whereas the majority of the ulama have said, no, every single day is mustaqil in its niyyah. Every single day has its own niyyah. Because the Messenger of Allah said, مَنْ لَمْ يُبَيْتِ النِّيَّةِ فَلَا صِيَامَ لَهُ. If a person doesn't have the intention before suhoor, meaning before the baytuta, meaning at night time, before fajr, then there is no siyam for this person. So what they're saying is that every single day has to have the tajdeed an-niyyah, and the istishab an-niyyah is not sufficient here. So what we will say is that the istishab an-niyyah is not sufficient if there is a presence of daleel. But if there is no presence of daleel, then the istishab an-niyyah, then the istishab an-niyyah continues. And an example of that I can remember now that some of the ulama have talked about is in the salah itself of istishab an-niyyah. So now, when the person goes into ruku', does he need to have the niyyah for ruku'? meaning I am bowing myself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I stand up again. Now I want to make sajda, putting my heart and my head on the floor in front of Allah. Or is the niyyah for him to pray from the very beginning included in all of the actions? Istishab al-niyyah. So there is no daleel which is there present to say that the person needs to make tajdeed of the niyyah. Then we will say, then that's it, khalas, then that person will be rewarded, unless if there is daleel. So that's the only thing that I can think of right now that comes to mind about the issue of ghafla. Meaning, if the person is negligent and hasn't thought about the intention, then the person will not be rewarded, except if there is istishab, meaning the person has made it clear from the very beginning that the reason why I'm doing this action is only to please Allah. So as long as that action continues, then he doesn't need to make a renewal of the niyyah. And even if he becomes negligent as to why he's doing it, or his iman drops, or he becomes distracted, inshallah the asl niyyah continues, as long as we've got no daleel to say that the asl niyyah needs to be renewed. Hopefully this makes sense. It sounds a little bit complicated, but I think if you go over it, it should clarify things, especially if you go over the notes that we had for istishab. Barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum.